folks, Dr. Rob Barrington here with some more nutrition advice. Now this video is going to be about allium vegetables, so that would include garlic, onions, shallots in particular, because they're the most commonly consumed allium vegetables, but you could also include leeks and chives in that as well. This video is going to look at these compounds, these plants and the compounds they contain from a slightly different point of view. There are lots of videos on allium vegetables and their general health effects, and research has shown that consumption of these plants, the bulbs from these plants, and the leaves as well, they contain particular chemicals, particularly diallyl disulfide, that appears to have beneficial effects. For example, on the cardiovascular system, they seem to have anti-diabetic effects. They have an antioxidant effect. There is an anti-inflammatory effect. They're certainly antimicrobial. They certainly have antimicrobial properties. And they have this general tonic effect that seems to make them very, very beneficial if you add them to your diet. But I wanted to do a video actually on the mood elevating effects of the allium vegetables. I've done a lot of videos on anxiety and depression, and I've tried to highlight many of the different nutritional strategies for treating anxiety and depression. And there is, a reasonable amount of research that shows that these allium vegetables have beneficial mood elevating effects. Now, the disadvantage with a lot of this research is that it's been done primarily on animals, particularly mice and rats. And these types of experiments use particular animal models. What they tend to do is they take the rodents and they expose them to particular experimental stress, and they feed these compounds. Generally, they feed compounds to them to see if they have these mood elevating effects. And they're reasonably good representations of they create stress. They represent the type of stress that humans would be exposed to. Just like humans, rodents don't like doing particular things, and if you make them do those things, they do get the same neurochemical changes. And you can, for example, put them in mazes and you give them the option to go into a light room or a dark room. Most rodents will go into the dark room because rodents like to be hidden. They don't like to be exposed to open spaces. And if you feed them these various chemicals, including allium vegetables and drugs, and many chemicals have been tested, what you find is that they have an increased propensity to go into the open arm, or it's called the open arm of these mazes, and that means that they're more relaxed, they're more happy to be in an open space. So these animal models have been very well calibrated. They're very well tested. They know, the people that create and develop these models know that they have limitations, but they are a reasonable representation of the types of stress that humans would be exposed to, and the neurochemical changes that happen in rodents are not dissimilar. So this is the caveat of this video. Most of these experiments have been done in rodents, and therefore it should be taken in that context. But there is some very interesting research that has been done, and when it's put in the context of all the other research that's involved in anxiety and depression, it does seem to show that these compounds, some of the chemical compounds within the allium vegetables, are beneficial to mental health. Now, there has been research done on garlic and onions. Now, shallots are really a botanical variety of onion. They both have the Latin name Allium cepa, and this means they're really effectively the same species, but they are varieties of the same plant. Most of the allium vegetables contain the same type of phytochemical profile. They contain this diallyl disulfide, which is what gives them their pungent aroma and taste, and that compound is broken down into further sulfide compounds when for example the allium vegetable is chewed or cooked, and this produces a very, very complex chemical layer of these sulfur compounds, and these compounds are very short-lived, a lot of them, and it's actually very difficult to measure them. So Many studies have been done on these sulfur compounds, and it's not entirely clear what they all are or how long they last, and they seem to different types of treatment seems to affect how much of the original compound is converted into some of these subsequent metabolites. So it's a they have a very complex sulfur phytochemical makeup, but they have some other interesting phytochemical properties as well. They tend to be rich in flavonoids, and this is a type of a phytochemical that we've come across many times before. The flavonoids are a very diverse group of secondary metabolites in plants. They're probably required for plants, plant defense mechanisms, but they are very good antioxidants, and they are bioavailable in humans and other animals. And when we consume plants containing flavonoids, we absorb the flavonoids, and they appear to have beneficial antioxidant effects in our tissues. There are also alkaloids of various types. There are phenolics, and there are various other phytochemicals that have been detected in these allium vegetables. But really, it's not surprising that consuming these allium vegetables have mood elevating effects. And if we look at the research that have been done on rodents, research has been done on depression and on anxiety. They have models that can kind of create both types of mood changes, and in terms of the depression, what they tend to do is they tend to put the animal in a hopeless situation and see how quickly it becomes immobile. The more quickly it becomes immobile, the more quickly it gives up. That is a very good representation of how depressed and the animal is. The animals that have less depression tend to give up less quickly. So there's things like the forced swimming test. There are other tests where you try and immobilize the animals, and those animals that have the least depression tend to give up the least quickly, and they tend to move more often. So these models, the anxiety, the maze test, and these immobility tests have been done, and both of them tend to show positive effects with garlic extracts, with shallot extracts, and with onion extracts. In other words, these compounds are producing an anti-anxiety and antidepressive effect. Now, evidence that this is this is beneficial comes from the fact that these compounds have actually been tested against medical drugs, which are known to have these effects in these models. So, for example, in the open maze test, where they're testing anxiety, they've tested allium vegetables against diazepam. Now, diazepam is an anxiolytic drug which is used and treated. It's one of the main treatments for anxiety in humans. It's often used as an aid to help sleeping, but it's given to people, for example, with panic attacks. Perhaps those people that are going in an aircraft that have a phobia of aircraft, they would perhaps be given diazepam. And it's also given as a general treatment for anxiety. Comparisons of the allium vegetables to diazepam show very similar effect in rodents. Which is good evidence that it is actually having an anxiolytic, that these compounds are having an anxiolytic effect. In a similar way, in the models of depression, they use, for example, they've compared the allium vegetables to the drug imipramine. Now, imipramine is one of the older classes of antidepressant drugs, but it is a tried and tested mainstream treatment for depression. For example, St John's Wort has been compared to imipramine as well. So these, and when imipramine is compared to the allium vegetables in the models of depression, what we find is that the rodents actually have the allium vegetables confer very similar antidepressant effects as the imipramine on the rodents. So this is a good piece of evidence that they are having similar effects. They definitely seem to have, in rodents at least, antidepressant effects, and they definitely seem to have anxiolytic effects in mice and rats as well. So this is very good evidence. Now, the final piece of the jigsaw, because a lot of this this science hasn't been done on humans, the final piece of the jigsaw is looking at the phytochemistry and thinking, well, what is it about the phytochemistry that could be having this effect? Is there a common factor within these allium vegetables that would show why they are possibly a good treatment for anxiety and depression? And what we find is that one of the flavonoids that's in very high concentrations in allium vegetables is called quercetin. Now, quercetin is a flavonol. It's a subgroup of the flavonoids, and quercetin has been shown in in a large amount of scientific research to be at least an anti-anxiety compound. Now the reason for this is that quercetin seems to have an affinity for the what's sometimes called the benzodiazepine receptor, but it's really the GABA A receptor. Now the GABA A receptor is a receptor in the brain that is required for creating an inhibitory effect in the brain. It calms down other neurons, and the compound that causes this receptor to be activated is a small amino acid neurotransmitter called GABA. And this is why it's called the GABA receptor. Now when GABA locks onto the GABA receptor, it decreases the electrical activity in the brain, and it has a calming effect. Benzodiazepines, which are a class of drug which includes diazepam, which I've just mentioned, which is used as an anxiolytic drug, also bind to the GABA A receptor, and this is why they are an effective treatment for anxiety. They have this calming effect. They reduce the electrical activity in the brain. Now what's been shown is that quercetin and some of the other flavanols and some of the other flavonoids, but particularly quercetin, appears to have a very similar effect on the GABA A receptor to the benzodiazepines. It locks onto the receptor and it has this calming effect in the brain. So therefore it doesn't actually lock onto the same part of the GABA receptor as the benzodiazepines, so it doesn't have exactly the same effect. The GABA A receptor has a number of different receptor sites, and a number of different compounds can lock onto the receptor, but certainly quercetin has been shown to bind to the receptor, and it does seem to have this anxiolytic effect. So this could be one of the ways that the allium vegetables are effective mood elevating compounds. There is also the possibility that they are actually anti-stress compounds. There is some evidence that garlic and some of the other allium vegetables, but garlic has been looked at particularly, it does appear to contain plant steroids. There are steroid-like compounds within the plants, and these steroid-like compounds have been shown in a range of plants to be able to interact possibly with the cortisol receptor in some way, and perhaps are able to block the cortisol receptor. Now, because cortisol is a compound that is released when as a reaction to stress, and stress is known to be one of the factors that causes depression and anxiety, it's not surprising therefore that these compounds may actually have beneficial effects in terms of their ability to decrease stress. So there is a link there as well. So these allium vegetables, they're very healthy vegetables. There's a lot of research that's been shown how much they can benefit your health generally. Cardioprotective effects, anti-cancer effects, anti-diabetic effects. They appear to have weight loss effects as well. They certainly have an antioxidant effect, antimicrobial effects. These effects are very widespread, and they're very well researched. But the research on the mental health aspect hasn't really been covered, and so therefore I just wanted to mention that as well as those other benefits, there is the possibility that they could actually have a very positive effect on your mental health. Now, the antioxidant effect that they have, they appear to have this very broad general antioxidant effect, and some of that will come from the quercetin and the other flavonoids that they contain, and some of the phenolics that they also contain. It's been shown that those compounds, plant compounds that have an antioxidant effect, also appear to have beneficial effects on mental health generally. And one of the reasons for this is that the higher your antioxidant status and the better your diet, and the more plant compounds that contain these antioxidants, the more neuroprotective your diet is. These antioxidants appear to be very beneficial at protecting neurons in the brain, and they appear to have positive cognitive effects. This is probably related to the fact that your brain is really made up of polyunsaturated fats, and those fats are very susceptible to oxidation. So your brain starts to become rancid over time if you don't have high levels of antioxidants in your diet. Taking the allium vegetables, which have high levels of antioxidants, will give you a general neuroprotective effect, just as any plant food would that contains high levels of antioxidants. So there's that general protective effect. But some of those compounds that are protective on an antioxidant level may also have the specific ability to bind to receptors in the brain and change the neurochemistry. and then this might be why these vegetables have been shown, at least in animals, to be very protective of your neurochemistry. So that's a very brief overview of why, another reason why you should really put these types of vegetables into your diet. I know most people that are interested in nutrition are aware of how healthy garlic is. Not so many people are aware that onions really have shown the same health effects as garlic. So most of the biological benefits that have been shown for garlic can also be argued for onion. And of course, shallots are just a variety of onion. And in fact, if you look at the research, shallots contain even higher amounts of quercetin than most kind of commercially available onions. And red onions as well are slightly different, because the red colour in the red onions is caused by a group of flavonoids called the anthocyanins. And again, that just shows that there are a variety of flavonoids within these vegetables, and those flavonoids may well contribute either to the general antioxidant ability of onions, or they could have specific effects on your neurochemistry in your brain. So my recommendation is to eat a variety of allium vegetables: shallots, chives, leeks, onions, garlic, whatever whatever takes your fancy. There are different varieties of all of these vegetables. They all have based on the literature, they all have they have common phytochemical profiles, but those profiles differ between the different varieties, and therefore consuming a range of these vegetables would appear to give the best protection in terms of providing these phytochemicals and providing a range of phytochemicals that are going to have this beneficial neurochemical and neuromodulatory effect. So I hope that was interesting. As always, eat well, stay healthy, and protect yourself, and I will see you soon for another video. Take care.